the discussions and deliberations which were being held in respective halls in these 3.5 days. So I would like to call upon here on the stage the reporters of these sessions and also the moderator, inviting Ms. Noel de Guzman for, she's a rapporteur for enabling access. For security and DNS, Mr. Don Hollander. For internet and human rights, Ms. Jennifer Cheung. Thanks for that. That's nice welcome to them, and I think that's an energetic welcome also, especially it's been quite some time that you've had your food, and that must have definitely broken up and now given a lot of energy. So good to see that. For IGF and the future of Internet ecosystem, inviting Penghua Ang. And for the youth IGF, Mr. Wilson Lam. So each one of them is going to be presenting a summary of their respective sessions, and I hand over to Mr. Penghua Ang for moderating the session.
That was to attract your attention. Now that we have attention. Okay. We're going to be brief. I'm told that we actually have about 5 minutes each. So each presenter is a very short time. Then begin with Noel.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm the rapporteur for enabling access. Very briefly, these are workshops number 5 towards an accessible internet for people with disability. Workshop number 14, bringing diverse linguistic communities together for a unified ID and rule set. Workshop number 14, which is bridging the digital divide, lessons from Southeast Asia and the South Pacific. And lastly, workshop number 8, connecting the next 2 billion, the role of free and open software. I just have 7 points, and the first one would be, it was recognized by participants in the workshop that internet access and accessibility are key components for creating an equitable internet. So this not only means access to affordable and high-speed internet, but also access to the rich variety of content and services and applications that can be found online. In connection with this, recognizing the efforts that we have in promoting access and expanding internet access in the region, it was also recognized that connecting the next billion will be a fundamentally different challenge, and we are expected to encounter a different set of challenges from the ones that we encountered in trying to connect the first billion, in that the next billion will be made up of people and communities who are more disadvantaged, they are more underserved, they live in more remote areas, they have less exposure to ICT, and they also have languages other than English as their mother tongue. So, and at the same time, it's important to note that these segments of society also often have compounding limitations to internet access. You know, they live in small states, they're very poor, they don't have a lot of education, so those things. In relation to this, it is also important for us, the participants noted, to be able to address the requirements of marginalized communities and people with special needs, using mobile as a foundational tool for internet access. A lot of participants recognize that because it is mobile, that mobile devices that are being used increasingly as kind of an entry point for a lot of people to access the internet. An example of this are applications that target the needs of the bottom of the pyramid, and also internationalize domain names that allow people to utilize the internet in their native tongue. This is part of a broader recognition by participants and panelists in these workshops of the need for tailor-fit solutions. There were separate comments in the workshops that emphasized that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for enabling access. The amount of diversity that we have in Asia-Pacific, whether this is linguistic, topographical, cultural, socioeconomic, political diversity, means that solutions must be customized to the local context. At the same time, these solutions, participants noted, must also be scalable in that in many cases, they are also meant to benefit large segments of the population. While being customized, solutions must also be a shared endeavor, which means there's a need for more partnership and also more input, especially from local communities themselves, whether this is in creating a rule set for an IDN or developing useful applications software. A number of participants in the workshops also identify the role of governments in creating a policy and regulatory environment that's conducive to internet use and investment. This means interventions that enable rather than restrict access to the internet, for instance, in the form of competition law, open source policies, fair use policies for copyright laws, and universal access policies. Lastly, these workshops recognize the need for localized content, services, and applications, including multilingual content, empowering communities by developing content that is relevant to them and their needs will help to ensure that people utilize internet connectivity when they have it. At the same time, it was recognized that the development of content that preserves cultural and linguistic diversity of communities in Asia-Pacific is also a positive move towards a truly globalized internet. That's all from me. Thanks.
Don, you want to connect? Yeah.
So my focus is on the security, some of the security workshops. So on Sunday there was a justice sector engagement program workshop, and that was aimed at a combination of CCTLD managers and people from the justice sector. So that's policy people, judges, regulators, investigators, lawyers, police, and others. So the program, which had run several other times in other parts of the world, looked at the details of where information about internet participants can be found, making use of just publicly available information. And it highlighted that because of the diversity of the managers of internet resources, names and numbers, there are many, many places that investigators need to go to find the information that they're looking for. The workshop also looked at a sample of different ways that malicious actors work in pursuing their nefarious goals. So this is, and that is a key theme that seems to go throughout the sessions that I'm reviewing, which is that there are some less than nice people out on the internet, and how do you manage to deal with them. The DNSSEC for Laymen workshop or session introduced us in a simple and very straightforward and very clear approach how the DNS works and how DNSSEC works within it. There are many players in the chain of trust for DNSSEC, including the root zone manager, that's IANA, the top-level domain operators, CCTLDs and GTLDs, registrars, hosts, ISPs, and end-user software. So there's a lot of value in the adoption of the DNSSEC by registrants because it means that the user can be sure that they're going to the place that they meant to go and they're not being hijacked in the middle. But there are parts of the chain that are missing, and particularly the ISPs and the end user software. And until the parts of the chain are actively engaged, that is, the whole group are working and well deployed, there seems to be little demand. And the people who are not deploying, so ISPs and browsers, are saying that there's little demand, as evidenced by the low DNSSEC take-up. So that's sort of a chicken and egg situation. But by deploying DNSSEC and by using DNSSEC registration, you'll be able to have more confidence that your users will be getting to the right place and that you as a consumer will get to the right place. The cybersecurity policy, strategy, and implementation in the Asia-Pacific region workshop, according to the speakers, the cost from cybercrime now exceeds more than $1 trillion each year. And there are a wide range of attack risks. There's criminal, but there's also military and industrial espionage happening. We heard that there was a serious issue within the Indian legal community about the degradation of trust within the internet, and that there doesn't seem to be a lot of confidence in the police and investigative people, constables, if you will, that they understand the issues around cybercrime. And this ties in very nicely to the workshop that we ran on Sunday, which was aimed at providing training to the justice sector community. And I'm delighted to hear that NICSI, the operator of the .in CCTLD, is developing a program to go out to the justice sector based on the workshop that we ran on Sunday. So speakers from India expressed concern that the attribution, in the sense of identifying users on the internet, is not currently a seamless operation, and that government agencies are struggling with this. We did hear from a speaker from Japan about how cybersecurity has been conceived and shifted from information security for many years, and now more recently has adopted a wider strategy and definition of cybersecurity, including threats other than to the information itself, which would include the infrastructure. But there is hope for the future, we heard, and if there's enough interest, then people's behavior can be changed to be much more security conscious. Then this morning, we heard during the governance for the Internet of Kids, Teenagers, and Youngsters. This was fascinating. I don't know whose idea it was to bring 30 or 40 students from one of the schools in Delhi, but it was brilliant. These were young people who were well aware of what's going on, very cogent, very articulate, and very willing to stand up in front of a group from around the world and share their experiences, their concerns, and what they think might be the solution. So if you missed that session, that was brilliant. So it's clearly a concern that there's a risk that inappropriate content on the internet brings. But the children, at least the children of India that we saw, they are well aware of the issues, and the adults are also aware of the issues. And there's work on how do you address it. And I was delighted that the kids and the adults seem to believe that the way to address this issue was through education. So there's a call to have some children-friendly internet services and children-friendly internet devices. We heard about the .kids new GTLD, but it's all about education and how the kids can know how to deal with things, which generally means go to their parents or go to their teachers, and then making sure that their parents and their teachers know how to help the kids work through this. And there's a fair number of people in the in the APRIGF who are working on this in various guises. So very heartening. So in summary, there were themes across all 4 of these sessions. People are well aware of the risk from using the internet and putting their own information online. The Justice Sector Engagement Workshop showed police and other investigators how to pursue these mischievous actors. The same people who are seeking to hijack personal information that the children and adults are well aware of. And the commercial and state information is also at risk. But we heard during the DNSSEC for Layman's workshop that it's not so hard to apply some security to ensure that the domain that you're seeking to find is indeed the one that you reach. So I'd like to thank the organizers for asking me to participate in these sessions. They were very interesting, and they all did seem to tie together. So thank you very much.
Jennifer next.
Hi, so I'm Jennifer Cheung, and I am the rapporteur for the Internet and Human Rights track during the APRIGF. So let's start with the first workshop. It's network neutrality in the Asia-Pacific. So this touches on very important issues of competition, consumer choice, freedom of expression, network management, and the need to develop transparent policies that encourage user trust and openness on the internet. So what is this network neutrality? So the principle is that the data should be treated equally without discrimination, restriction, or interference, independent of the sender, receiver, type, content, device, service, or application. The legal debate on network neutrality and whether or not ISPs are common carriers has been on in the United States and Europe for a long time now. For the Asia-Pacific region, the panel invited us to consider whether or not these principles can or should be applied across the diverse geographies, cultural traditions, and roles of government, or if network neutrality is simply a Western construct. So case studies were presented for Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and also India, our host country. From the user end, we were asked to remember that openness is one of the fundamentals upon which the internet was created, and that network congestion should be met by further infrastructure investment and not by throttling or blocking the traffic. Participants also reminded us that for many developing countries within the AP region, there is an additional issue of basic access to the internet on top of network neutrality issues. The leap from 0 to 1 is a massive jump for most people who may be getting their first taste of internet on mobile devices. There may be a dilemma of giving access at low or zero cost at the expense of not realizing that there is a larger internet ecosystem beyond a few preferred services or websites. From the business perspective, telcos, software providers, over-the-top providers, ISPs also want an innovative ecosystem to be enabled by the internet, the treatment of the internet, which enables these businesses to flourish. So the AP region needs to consider whether it can and should it build upon the principle of net neutrality and how it can find sustainable models of principle-led economics that also foster openness and innovation on the internet. This brings me to the second workshop on this track, and it is surveillance, restoring trust on the net. The Snowden revelations has brought global attention to the arbitrary and excessive mass surveillance programs carried out by various states. This has severely undermined user trust in online platforms. The Asia-Pacific region is actually not exempt from the issue of arbitrary surveillance. In fact, many nations within this region, such as Iran and Pakistan, top the list among the most surveilled states around the world. There were different opinions put forth regarding targeted surveillance or mass surveillance or indiscriminate surveillance, whether mass surveillance is less stigmatizing because there is a veil of anonymity or more stigmatizing and discriminative because there is a treatment of people like potential criminals. We were reminded during the discussion that there is a move internationally to consider metadata as sensitive personal information. Now, metadata is a very necessary substance of the Internet of Things. From the business perspective, ideas around surveillance is framed in terms of compliance of laws and regulations. Data transfer is essential for businesses, and they are also obliged to comply with the law. There needs to be a truth in labeling that consumers know what they're actually signing up for. So additional suggestions for steps to restore trust. Panelists and participants said that it was important for surveillance procedures to comply with the necessary and proportional principles. Most people agree that some surveillance is necessary for nations to protect their sovereign interests. One push is open source, free and open source software, and end-to-end encryption as being one way to resist the resistance. The panel also suggested a need to build a firewall between metadata and personal identifying data, and having a proper judicial gateway, and also calls for regional and international reforms for subscriber identifying data. The third workshop in this track is called Towards a Dynamic and Active Asia-Pacific Internet Governance Right-Based Space with a Gender Perspective. And it's a pretty long title there. So Asia-Pacific countries in general experience a disconnect between global internet policies and local legislation. There is a progress in discussion around human rights in cyberspace globally, but local legislations in this region continue to advocate restrictions in cyber freedoms. So the panelists in this workshop gave us an overview of the current situation in the Philippines with the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012, and also highlighted the ongoing struggles of the LGBT community and their advocacy on the Internet for Equality. Some recommendations that came out of this workshop advocate that human rights should be at the core in Internet governance discussions. On the AP regional level, unlike other regions, the panelists and also participants are in agreement that we don't have a one regional unified policy system that we can engage with. So the APR-IGF can actually emerge as a genuine and inclusive multi-stakeholder space to fulfill this need. Public policies governing cyberspace should also reflect the interests of the people, especially the marginalized. So there also needs to be gender equity in terms of policy development and relevant metrics from a gender perspective. Panels has called for a need for more active participation of women and other marginalized sectors. One constraint to this is actually the availability of funding for these groups to participate. So at the local and national level, it may mean organizing similar spaces to reach out to a larger population and encourage more participation. There's also need to raise awareness on issues emerging in the Internet through campaigns, capacity building, skills, and also training. We must not forget that the Internet is an enabler of rights, an enabler of freedoms, and for women and other marginalized groups, this can have transformative benefits, boosting empowerment and affecting progress. So the last workshop, the fourth workshop in this track, is called Minimizing Legal Risks Online Intermediaries While Protecting User Rights. Internet usage in the AP region has been growing at an exponential rate, and online service providers have benefited enormously from this growth. But this means this poses challenges for the region for online service providers in terms of legal risks involved with respect to user-created content. Across the world, it has been an accepted policy that service providers on the Internet cannot be held liable for user-created content. And this principle is found in place in many legislation enacted in this field in most countries. However, the Asian region has often been seen blocking services and websites due to user-created content that is deemed to be illegal. The panelists in this workshop discussed the recent Global Spain case in the European Union and this is the case that created the right to be forgotten. And this is also the first time that any court of law created such rule on intermediary liability, which is not secondary to the authors or the content generator. The panel opined that this is deeply challenging to the tenets of the internet. Whether or not Google Spain's effects will be felt in the AP region is still unclear, but there is need for a local legislature across the region to step in, and additional checks and balances of issues of law enforcement power with takedown notices need to be examined. And the panel put forward that clarity and utilization of safe harbor provisions for intermediaries can also safeguard against abuse and uphold freedom of expression while conforming to norms of justice. The suggested way forward include creating a putback mechanism to combat the inclination of intermediaries to err on the side of caution, and to also address the asymmetry in incentives, which also would lead to rampant censorship. So this concludes my wrap-up for the Internet and Human Rights track.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, very clear summary. Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Wilson Lam for the U5GA.
Wilson Lam here, and representing the mission ambassadors reporting on the YIGF sections. So 3 days ago, we come here with a mission to engage the participants to explore, express, and experience the whole IG discussions. So in these 3 days, together with 60 participants, we produced over 30 position papers, engaged in over 12 hours of internal discussions, 4 panelist discussions, and create 1 public sections. So these are our achievements. And I would now like to invite a representative of our YIGF participants, Ms. Anchal Dixit, to come to the panel and share with you the participants' learning on the whole YIGF sections.
Good evening, everyone. I, Anchal Dixit, represent YIGF section here. YIGF principle is for youth and by youth. Youth, being the integral part of the community of internet users, need awareness about using internet, as correctly stated in previous 3 days by various panelists, that we all start using internet just and go with the flow. We are never taught how to use internet, and thus we are not informed with the positive or the negative impacts, or the positive or the negative guidelines to use it. Here, YIGF acted as the awareness camp, or should I say, it was a place where we got to share our ideas and views. Where rather, basically, we are never given such a platform where our ideas or the views are heard and they are taken up for the policy buildings. YIGF encouraged us to think from the new perspective. It worked on the multi-stakeholders approach. We were assigned roles as different stakeholders, like government. Government also had various divisions, business perspective, social media, youth was the other part, NGOs. From these perspectives, we are usually say our views, how we use internet, how we want the internet to work out, and what we want. Through YIGF camp, we got to know the perspective of these stakeholders that we usually blame. We usually blame government, we usually blame the social media, they sold our data or something like that. But from this discussion panels, from this internal discussions and the panelist discussion, we got to know the various difficulties faced by these particular stakeholders in bringing out what we want. We discussed basically on governance. Our 3-day session was divided into 3 different topics: openness, access, and security. Openness basically dealt with Equinet. We discussed on various censorship issues, various surveillance issues. Basically youth, or should I say everyone nowadays, have problems with surveillance. that why the government is monitoring us, or why our data is being taken by the various social medias. We discussed on these topics, and we talked about whether how much limit should be there of by us, how much limit should be there of sharing data by us, and how much should the limitations or should monitoring be done towards us by the government, or by what should be the intergovernmental body. There should be intergovernmental body to discuss, to form a baseline of rules for all the social medias or all the organizations which collect our data, which we as a youth or which we as a common general public utilize, and they share our data on the internet. We also discussed on forming a on a national level a panel with these multi-stakeholders, which can decide at how much surveillance or how much limitation should be there. We also discussed on forming infrastructure for the rural areas of where the internet has not yet reached. It has not yet people are not yet using internet. These infrastructural will provide them benefit for easy access, as well as for it would be economical for them, especially in the rural areas of India, where the education has been the first priority. Internet can even be used for that, for e-classes, like e-classes. It has been very intriguing experience witnessing such great dignitaries and their discussions, and getting to know the views of these dignitaries, which are who are masters of their own fields. Very helpful part of this entire setting of YIGF was that we were allowed to interact with anyone we wished, and we are very obliged to everyone present here to who very patiently listened to us whenever we approached them and keenly discussed with us. It helped us in increasing our enthusiasm and also the confidence. So thank you all again. I also would like to say that we youth present here are either the students or just a few year pass out with not much experience in the real world, and especially thank you for giving us this opportunity to expressing our views, because we have that and we doesn't get so much platform to share our ideas. At last, on the behalf of all the youth present here, I would like to thank ISPI and Nixie for conducting this YIGF, and with so many discussions and everything, .Asia for bringing Net Mission in India. We are keenly looking forward towards Net Mission Indian chapter. So, and with all this, I would especially like to thank Mr. Rajiv Duggal also for bringing the practical approach. He told us about so many apps we use and not the reality of the apps. To Mr. Paul Wilson, who showed us the technical front of internet issues. And I would like to congratulate everyone who was connected with YIGF or APRIGF in any or every way for such a huge success for first Indian YIGF. And thank you all.
Hang on, before you step down, I just want to observe that Wilson outsourced his presentation to India. I want to get the youth. Are they here in this room? Can you guys rise? Can you just stand where you are, the youth? Yeah, but please join me to stand. Give them a standing ovation. Credit. Yeah, please sit down now. Thank you. Yeah, I attended briefly a session that they did, and they did very, very well. I have to say, they played their roles very earnestly, including some memorable lines like "I'm CEO, I know nothing," and it was memorable line for me. Probably very accurate, but they played the roles very seriously, and you can see a very lively debate going on there. Credit for this must go to Edmund and company, .Asia, bring this here, and I guess we hope that we will continue and grow from strength to strength. It's very good, yeah. I have last part to summarize briefly. Yeah. I've asked for the presentation to come up. Yeah. So the way that we've organized this is that the panels are proposed, and then we group them into various tracks. So this is the track on the IGF and the future of the internet ecosystems. I'll try to do this in briefly as I can. Normally, you have a good-looking person to present, but it's free, so you guys have to put up with me. And the person who presented is actually Shirley. Some of you have met her, much better looking than me, and probably speaks better, well, definitely speaks better than me also. So I'm presenting on behalf of her. She captured most of the presentations, but some parts she had to go back, and her term begins today actually. So she goes from airport to the school and starts work. Yeah. Okay. This is the 5 sessions that are covered here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5 sessions. The first one on internet and as an equally accessible ecosystem for universal progress. So some comments that were put up, and you guys can see, open structure, low entry barrier made it possible for the internet to be widely available. The issue is that of equity and equality, and we've lumped the term into equitability, which is the title for the theme for this conference. It is difficult. I think the conclusion is that achieving equity and equality is difficult, but we have to pursue that as a goal, despite that difficulty. My next slide is on ICANN globalization. You will know that ICANN has set up 3 sort of headquarters, about equal, one in the US, of course, one in Turkey, Istanbul, and then one in Singapore. And so this session is talking about what ICANN is doing and some of the things that it's planning to achieve. So 2 sort of big themes here. One is what ICANN has been doing. So talking about some challenges that ICANN faces, how much money to invest, the return on investment, what work, which, and as the Vice President Quek had commented, it's just not possible to translate all ICANN documents to all languages, just not possible. Some concerns of ICANN that were expressed, the view that ICANN is a US-based company, and so will be biased in that direction. On Asia-Pacific engagement, which is what ICANN is doing more of. So part of the move of reason for move of ICANN is that you be closer to the stakeholders that it is serving. And one thing to note is that ICANN is not one single entity. My last point. Think of it as a whole ecosystem. It is quite a complex ecosystem. There are various groups and a lot of alphabet soups. Some of you will be very familiar by now. CCNSO, GNSO, so country codes coming in, and then generic codes are coming in as well. So the hope is that ICANN can indeed engage governments and raise awareness of internet governance issues to a larger public. This panel is a plenary panel on the IANA stewardship transition. This group, I guess, will know by now that IANA, part of ICANN, that is to be moved out of ICANN in some way, but exactly how and what, it's not really clear. So the panel was talking about what this would look like. It was chaired by an ICANN board member, Kowe Wu, is sitting here, and it was an ICANN process, really. So you put your questions up there, and then people voted on the questions. The more votes there are, then they would come out and they would address. And so at the end of it, 4 questions were discussed, and sort of in order of vote popularity. Right. So there were other questions that were raised, but these were not discussed. So the first is the feasibility of U.S. government's conditions to the success, to the process and outcome of this transition. So these were questions that are raised. They are not answers because you get different answers from different people. So it is quite a complex issue. Second one was, what do you expect to see after transition in the longer term? What problem are you trying to solve? How will things get better after the transition? Okay. Again, like I said, it's a question raised rather than answers given. The third one was the timeline of transition. What happens if we can't succeed achieving this proposed transition in time? What happens then? And then the fourth question to address is what is a global multi-stakeholder community? What exactly is it? How is that defined? And if you cannot reach consensus, can the U.S. government say that because the U.S. government doesn't agree that what was the group that was used was a multi-stakeholder group, can the U.S. government reject the outcome if it does not like the outcome? Another group that I was recording for is this multi-stakeholder internet governance, and discussion was around the multi-stakeholderism. There was a wide range of discussions, and as you will know, again, with IGF, you discuss issues and don't necessarily achieve an outcome, an agreement. So these are the points that were discussed, history, and then the implication of what it means to use the multi-stakeholder process. And then the final one, we just concluded. So I guess it's still fresh in many of our minds. Some points that were made, the NETmundial process should follow the IGF multi-stakeholder process, meaning that you should use multi-stakeholder, transparent, be democratic in achieving the agenda for the meeting. There were comments that development appears to be held hostage to internet governance issues, because for the World Summit, one of the drivers for the World Summit was development, but development seems to have taken a back seat, and internet governance seems to have taken a front seat. There was also a UN General Assembly resolution put up. This was really hot off the press. It was just passed in late July, very late July. And so the panel ended up spending more time discussing that. The question was whether this document was good for the multi-stakeholder process or not. The panel concluded that it was actually good because it would appear for the first time you would have civil society, business coming into the General Assembly giving inputs in discussing this agreement. And the outcome of this is not just a talk shop, but really some agreed upon document. The consensus was that this resolution was quite ambitious because you're aiming to achieve an outcome, which is an agreed upon document, when actually before that a lot of attempts at coming up with agreements, and these have been difficult. But this one looks like an ambitious goal, and we have until 2015 to arrive at that. So perhaps we might achieve something there, given the timeline that we have. Okay. And then now, of course, is where we are. Thank you for taking the time here. Any comments or questions for any of us? Okay. Right. Okay. So, John, please join me to thank those. Summarizing.
Yeah, thank you to all 6 of you for giving us a snapshot of what was discussed in your sessions. Thank you, indeed, excellent work. Thank you. May I request you to please now be seated in your respective seats so that we can move out to the closing session now.